there were several pirate attacks. So what would happen was these pirates would come board the boat that would threaten all the passengers with, machetes, guns, etc.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Putting.
And welcome to another episode of Chocolate and Coffee Break. I'm looking forward to another conversation over chocolate and coffee to explore how stories open hearts, build belonging, and keep our shared humanity alive. Today, my guest has been born into a story of generations carried through courage, crossing oceans, and finding new soil to grow in. So he has a legacy of survival, gratitude, and compassion that continues to shape the way he moves through the world. So I'm really interested to have a chat with Eric today and find out more about his family's story. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Andrea. Good morning. And first and foremost, I appreciate you having me on your podcast today.
Thank you for coming along, Eric. So I like to start with a question from my heart opening question from my pack. And the question I have for you today is, what is interesting about where your family came from?
My origin story begins in Vietnam, where I was born in the district of Chalon, which was, called Saigon back then. But prior to that, the grassroots of where my parents came from was Cambodia, and they were both. My mum was born in Phnom Penh, and my dad was born in a rural city called Crammed. And through the formation of their relationship, they had to escape their birth country due to a regime, and so they crossed the border over to Vietnam, where I was born, and that's how I came into this world, and I'm just really grateful to be able to share their journey with you today.
I would love to hear more about their story because as a child and a young person growing up in Australia, I remember hearing a lot about the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia and being absolutely horrified about it. So I'd love to hear more about your parents' story and their escape from Cambodia.
Yeah, so it's something that obviously they don't talk about a lot, and they've shared fragments of the story to me as I was growing up. From my understanding, Dad, he was, grew up with his great grand auntie, and he had to, live away from his biological family. So he already had a hard life to start with. And my mum was very similar, like she barely finished primary school and had to go out and work as soon as she was a teenager to support the family. So during their early adult life, my dad became a bookkeeper, and my mum was doing housekeeping, and she became a nurse. However, during that time of the regime, what happened was when the Khmer Rouge took over, they actually sought to seek out anyone with intelligence, and they actually intentionally tried to exterminate anyone which had, qualifications such as a university degree or was seen to be intelligent. And so a lot of the citizens had to just, escape when they took over the capital. And so my parents told me that, they had to flee their homes with, fridge full of food and then just leave everything and escape into the jungle, which a lot of the citizens had to do at the time. And it was just a very immediate, abrupt, and quite a brutal takeover. Um, I did get to visit um, Cambodia a couple of years ago with my mum, but yeah, I didn't choose to go to the museums or uh, the museums that shared about the killing field, because I thought that was it's quite a traumatic experience, and yeah, I chose not to go there. But that's how they escaped, and then they headed off across the border to Vietnam, where I was born.
So they had quite a heroic kind of journey, didn't they, to get there? And I'd really like to hear a little bit about that because I don't think people really understand. We talk about people escaping and getting on boats and like coming to Australia, and they just see them as people coming to Australia. They don't see the story behind those people and what they've had to go through. So I'd love to just share a bit of that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So even going from Cambodia across the border to Vietnam, where I was born, mum and dad almost had to establish, a new life in a second country. And it came about, um, I guess, after the conflict with the US, because we refer to it as the Vietnam War, but to the Vietnamese people, they like to refer to it as the conflict with the US. And so there was that divide between the North and the South. And my parents would say that, things got quite tough living in Vietnam still. And they heard that there were people who managed to escape the country. And so they toyed with that idea. My dad, gathered up his life savings. I don't know what that was back in the time, but he did tell me that he had to have like a certain number of pieces of gold to be able to get on a boat. And that was organized through one of my relatives. So if you could imagine that a young couple, in their late 20s with a small baby, they thought about fleeing um, their country, and it's always done in quite a secretive um, manner where someone organizes a commercial fishing boat, and then a group of families just pull together and pay that sum of money to the owner of the boat. So there actually was a monetary transaction to the process, not just the physical aspect of jumping on board a boat. So they did that, and the consequences of being captured was that you'd be sent to a penitentiary. So my mum would have, if she got caught, be sent to like a women's jail, and likewise my dad. And for me, I would have been sent to an orphanage. So it's a big, massive, high risk exercise to undertake something like that. So when they left um, the harbour, I don't know where it was specifically, but they said that they left in a fishing boat. Everyone hid underneath, and then that fishing boat would take sail out of the bay. And what the idea was to just find the nearest country which they could seek refuge. And so um, mum told me that obviously that boat was really crammed with other refugees, so it's not like a luxury yacht or anything like that. So the underfloor or the cabin is quite dark, it's quite cramped, and during the day, if you could imagine, you're sailing out to sea and it's really hot. You're in the extremities, and for what is almost a non-seaworthy vessel, they had to try to survive for the next couple of days. So there's limited food, limited water, and then the other aspect of the journey was we were under constant attack. So
Let's just go to a quick break and have a bite of chocolate and
okay.
see what the sponsors are up to,
Yep.
and then we'll come back and finish that story.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who are radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, I share their stories and wisdom and the magic that menopause truly holds. 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
So, Eric, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you were going to say about your parents being on the boat. I know there is some really tough stuff that I just want to quickly explore with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so getting back to the boat, there were several pirate attacks. So what would happen was these pirates would come board the boat that would threaten all the passengers with, machetes, guns, etc. And their idea was to just come and take any valuable possessions. So when that happened, my dad had to, take off his watch and just put it into the pool of possessions, and they were threatened at knife point on some of these occasions, which was very confronting. You think about leaving a country and then getting on a boat with no defence available, and so that happened several times during the voyage, not once, twice, but they told me that it happened up to 8 times. And during that time, some of the women were also sexually assaulted, and sometimes it was a bit too much. Some of them just jumped overboard. So there were some of the harrowing scenes that happened during the voyage. So, no food, very little water. You've got nothing other than the shirt on your back, and then you're being attacked by, some of these barbarians. So it was quite confronting to hear my parents share that. But then eventually there was some hope when we saw land in the distance, and that happened to be the Malaysian coastline. But then when we um, put foot on Malaysian soil, the authorities just rounded us up like animals, and we were told to, put our hands on our heads. Young women, older grandmas got told to do that, and they sent us to a refugee camp at Pulau Bidong.
Yeah, it's quite a story, and I just cannot imagine going through all of that. And I just think your parents obviously very brave and courageous to undertake it, and even more to survive it. I think having you there as a baby must have made an enormous difference to their attitudes that they had to survive for you. So how has this story all affected who you are and your experiences growing up?
Yeah, so I think that's the silver lining in this story is obviously there's the courage, the resilience, and the hope that my parents bore. I think the turning point was after a couple of months at the refugee camp. One of the immigration officers came up to Dad and presented him with some papers, and he thought, oh, what's going on here? And they said, look, congratulations, Liang. The Australian government has accepted you. And so with that, that was the turning point. That means we got released from the refugee camp, and that means that my parents had the opportunity to start a new life in Australia. So that was really the turning point for the change. And I remember Dad telling me that, when he first landed in Melbourne, he kissed the ground because he was just so grateful that he wasn't being shot at, he wasn't running away from somewhere, he didn't have to live behind barbed wires. So the gratitude extended um, far beyond that point, because when we landed in the hostel in Melbourne, there were actually some people from the local church group who came to help us. They help us help my parents find work. They encouraged them to, go to English classes. So those small acts of kindness make a really big difference to a person's life, and particularly when they're just new to a country and they've got no friends or family to lean on. So that is so impactful um, to see. And yeah, my parents still talk about to this day, the people, the strangers, the local Australians that came to help them. And, it's how fitting it is, because today, on the 13th of November, it's World Kindness Day. And I think the kindness of the Australian government and the local people, really changed our lives for the good.
I'm really overcome with joy to hear of the kindness that your family had when you came to Australia, and I believe that's what it should be, and that we should be welcoming to our to refugees when they do come to Australia. So I'm very pleased to hear that. So what are the important cultural things that your parents brought with you that you keep alive in Australia?
When I was growing up, Andrea, my parents would always celebrate the Lunar New Year. So the significance of that event is that, similar to, say, for example, Christmas Eve, um, families would get together, and because my mum was deeply spiritual, she would, you know, make a really beautiful meal, and then she would present that meal on the table. But that wasn't for us, that was to honor our late ancestors, particularly my maternal grandparents, who I never met, and my late brother, who I never got the opportunity to meet either, because unfortunately they tried to escape the regime, but they never made it out. So every time that we would celebrate the Lunar New Year, my parents or my mum would specifically, do that ritual, and there will be incense and offerings laid out. So it's something that I've always really cherished, growing up as a kid.
Yeah, I believe that there is so many cultural things that are rich that people want to keep and hold on to. Um, we've had well, some people say, "Oh, you've got to assimilate into Australia, Australian ways," but you don't want to lose that richness of culture. I think that's so important for us to hold on to. So what lessons do you think that are in there for other people to hear?
I think for me, there is a deep sense of gratitude in that someone saw potential in a family that had nothing. And to this day, um, there are our close family friends, Karen and Robert, who were at the very start of that journey. So we met them when, I think, within the first couple of weeks of coming to Australia, because we settled at a hostel in Box Hill, and they came to help us. And I think over the years, we've stayed in contact, and I still keep in contact with them. And they came to my 40th birthday party, and we've celebrated family events together. So that is something that I'll always cherish, because it's something that you can't buy. It's really like an earned trust, and it's a relationship which has developed organically over the span of 4.5 decades. So it's true testament that given someone had that belief and hope um, in a family, and it was just out of generosity and kindness. So how fitting it is, given that it's World Kindness Day today. And I think that's the important message here, Andrea. It's to spread kindness, irrespective of where we come from, because Australia is such a beautiful and diverse culture
Yeah,
for that.
beautiful.
Mm.
That's beautiful. So let's have another quick break and check out our sponsors. But while you do, why not subscribe, like, and comment on the show?
Introducing 123 Read to Me. We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 123 Read to Me. If this interests you, let's talk.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon.
So, Eric, you have lived a life of gratitude, and you've seen this beautiful experience of people accepting who you are. And where has that taken you today?
For me, the extension of that gratitude is my capacity to give back, and I try to give back in a multitude of ways. So I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to, graduate with double degrees from RMIT University in Melbourne. So I've had a wonderful career in tech, which wouldn't have been possible if, I didn't grow up in Australia. But um, within my professional context, I am a mentor. I've mentored up to 5 young professionals within the technology space. So within my company, we get interns, and I always take the opportunity to mentor those interns and guide them on their own career journey. I'm quite active, celebrating cultural celebrations within the workplace. So I've gotten involved in the Diwali celebration earlier this month, and also Lunar New Year's, and a few other celebrations. And then outside of work, I'm involved in the Stories That Stir community. So I'm the MC and I'm the main host here in Brisbane. And I feel that lived experience storytelling is a form of healing. So I shared my story about 18 months ago, and I really resonated with the theme of the platform. And since then, I've hosted 3 events, and I've had 18 storytellers come through who have shared some really beautiful and diverse lived experiences. And for me, that is my way of being able to give back to the community and pay it forward, like the people that helped my family early on.
Yeah. So what kind of stories come to life in Stories That Stir? It says something to me, but tell me a little bit more to understand why it's so important to you.
Yeah. So it's important to me because not a lot of people have the opportunity or a platform to be able to share their story. So for me, it's the ability to have them on and to be able to release it and to really share it from their heart. Unlike the TEDx platform, which is about an idea worth spreading, Stories That Stir is more on the theme of, a story that can enhance healing and build connections. So I've had many beautiful storytellers, people that have escaped cults, others who have survived trauma, some really hard hitting themes like suicide and death of children. So I feel that it's really important, and yet, um, a way that we can, build community connection, because every time I host the event, I get so many positive comments from the audience members, and as well as the storytellers, that, they've been felt really uplifted, and, they've built some strong connections.
Yeah, and I believe that story is a very important aspect of sharing our stories and giving space to share our stories, because that's how we break down barriers. When we start to understand somebody and see them as who they are and what they have experienced, then we it does break down those barriers. We just see them as human. Is that what you're finding with what you're doing?
Absolutely, Andrea. It's by sharing the story, it breaks down the barriers due to being more relatable, and also there's always an underlying core message. So we've had many themes throughout the platform, for example, growth, determination, and crossroads most recently. So those themes are all universally relatable, but it's really when that lived experience gets expressed from a real human being, I think that's where the heart to heart connection is. And unlike watching a video or reading a book, when you hear that story with all the emotions behind it, it's really captivating, it's engaging, and that's where the human connection is established, because it's a story which is shared from the heart. I think that's the beauty of this initiative.
Yeah, wonderful. And can you share with us a little bit about gratitude and how to to bring it into our everyday life?
For me, the gratitude is really just acknowledging some of the simple aspects of your life. For example, being able to sleep in a warm bed, having food on the table, think simple things like water and electricity. Um, I wasn't always a grateful person. It's only until recent years, actually, I attended a men's retreat, and they did a gratitude practice before every meal. So they would just express, what are the three things that you're currently grateful for? And it doesn't always have to be something positive. It could be a challenge, but by recognizing those little elements in your life, it's just really empowering. And then when you get into that state of gratitude, all the anger, the frustration, and the annoyance tends to dissipate. Um, I do have my days, but that's the philosophy that I've tried to follow for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. It is important for us to have gratitude with everything that we do, and I'm very grateful that you're here with me today. And can you share how people can get in touch with you and find out more about what you do?
Yes, Andrea. So I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so they can search Eric M on LinkedIn and Instagram. That's where they can find me.
Thank you. And thank you, Eric, for opening your heart and showing how connection keeps our humanity alive. So this week's Brew the Change Challenge is look for one small act of human kindness, name it out loud as gratitude, with a smile and a shared story, or someone who simply listens to acknowledge is when connection begins. So wherever you are, take a pause, share a moment of chocolate and coffee, and until we see you next time, let love be the last voice.